Welcome to Industry Day number 3 for the OASIS Plus contract program. I'm Adam Soderholm, the program sponsor of OASIS Plus, working in support of our executive champion and visionary, Tiffany Hickson. The team is excited to share highlights of the progress we have made as we inch closer to a final solicitation. First, I want to thank all the industry partners who took the time to review draft number 1 and draft number 2 of the solicitation and provided extensive feedback in the form of questions and survey responses. We appreciate that your time is valuable, and the team has considered every single response from over 2,200 questions and 700 survey responses. Regardless of the status of the contract, we always appreciate feedback from industry partners, and during today's session, on the last slide, we will again provide the centrally monitored email address if you would like to share more feedback. This mailbox has been available and monitored throughout all 10 of the program updates we've delivered. And if you're with us live right now, the Q&A feature is active, and please understand that we will consider any feedback received today equally with feedback submitted via email, and will not be answering questions live today. There will, of course, be a formal Q&A with the final solicitation as well. Okay, now for a moment of reflection on the OASIS Plus journey, which started back in 2017. First of all, for those that have been tracking from the beginning, you may remember Big Mac, and then we had Bic Mac, or then the less presumptuous Services Mac, before landing on OASIS Plus, which is the name that we'll carry forward. Some of you have been along for the ride with all 8 of the program updates, to include scope, small business strategy, early versions of section L and M and beyond, before we even got to draft number 1 back in November. We heard your feedback along the way, and it's reflected in the acquisition strategies decisions we've made and have adjusted along the way. We especially heard you that you want to see a draft that is really close to final, so you can prepare appropriately, and that's what we have delivered with draft number 2 last week. Meanwhile, we're doing the same with buying agencies and departments to get the best input on how their services-based needs are met in a flexible and an adaptable way. We have seen stronger partnership across government in terms of agency interest to help us create a family of contracts that will meet their needs. My hope is that we see the benefits of this approach to gathering stakeholder feedback and iterating on the best solutions to show up in the form of increased use of the eventual program, and ultimately the best mission outcomes for government as delivered by you all, the highly qualified industry partners who provide the solutions that keep moving our government forward. On our agenda today, we're going to cover several topics. We'll hear program goals and updates, talk about the milestones, have a short refresher on the overview of OASIS Plus, then highlight our findings from draft 1 and those adjustments into draft number 2, talk through the evaluation criteria, and then I'll come back on for a few reminders as closing remarks. Now I'd like to introduce the program manager, Susan Wallace.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. I'm Susan Wallace, the OASIS program manager, and I'm honored to be a part of this incredible OASIS journey and program, which is being built as a best-in-class, multi-agency, multi-award IDIQ for government-wide services and non-IT based solutions. And it will enable federal customers to acquire innovative solutions from highly qualified contractors and all sizes across multiple industries. Next slide, please. To give you an update on where we're at today, we issued our first draft on November 15, 2022, which produced over 2,200 questions and comments. Based on customer and industry feedback, we adjusted our strategy and issued our second draft on March 6, 2023, with 550 Q&A responses. The final 350 Q&A responses were released yesterday. The final RFP is due to go out on or about March 30th and will be open for 90 days. Our timeline is on track to ensure that all 6 OASIS Plus program contracts are awarded prior to the expiration of the legacy OASIS program. Next slide. As a recap, OASIS Plus features 6 individual contract families 5 of the 6 are set aside for small businesses and include small business, hub zone, 8A, service disabled veteran owned, woman owned, and the 6th contract family is an unrestricted vehicle contract. Next slide. Some of the unique features of OASIS Plus include a flexible and expandable domain-based structure, which is where the plus in OASIS Plus comes from. It's robust and expandable so that we have the ability to grow and change as the federal government's requirements change. OASIS Plus will enable global access to commercial and non-commercial services, allowing all contract types under the vehicle. All OASIS Plus contract families will have a 10-year ordering period with the authority to award task orders on the last day of the master contract's active period of performance that can continue for a duration of 5 years. The program features a broad scope and the contracts will have no ceiling, so there can be no cap on the number of awards. After initial awards are made, we will reopen the solicitation for continuous on-ramping opportunities. There will be technology-based ordering and market research tools available to assist OCOs develop their independent government estimates and ensure fair and reasonable pricing at the task order level. There will be no pricing at the master contract level. Pricing will be submitted at the task order level. This is in accordance with Section 876 of the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act. Next slide. All right, scope and fair opportunity structure. OASIS has an increased scope compared to the legacy OASIS contract and other service contracts within GSA. You can see the increased scope areas highlighted on this chart in light blue, orange, and gray. OASIS Plus will be comprised of 13 total domains with the ability to expand into the future based on need. Each domain is a category of similar types of services. The domains will be brought to contract in 2 phases, as you can see here. Phase 2 implementation date is unknown at this time. One thing I would like to point out, though, is phase 1 includes the enterprise solutions domain, which is focused on large and complex programs that could potentially span an entire agency's needs. All right, next slide. We have engaged you, our industry partners, and the acquisition workforce in many ways since 2021 to include focus groups, engagement sessions, RFIs, program updates on Interact and SAM.gov, feedback surveys, and we've publicly shared responses to approximately 900 questions and we've shared an OASIS Mass OASIS Plus comparison table. Here to speak more on these questions, Raybin from our contracting team is ready to discuss the next segment.
Thank you very much, Susan. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on your location. And really, thanks for taking time to join us today for the OASIS Plus Industry Day. I'm Raybin. I am our Senior Procurement Analyst in the OASIS Plus program. Prior to coming to GSA, I was in the Air Force for 20 years, and I'm coming on my 9th year in GSA. So I have to tell you, based on over the years, the level of engagement on OASIS Plus, I'm really proud to be a part of this team. I'm also proud to be building a best-in-class contracting vehicle with our industry partners, with you that, again, took the time to attend with us today. So I get to work with the contracting business and program professionals in doing that. And I want to tell you, we're really striving for that engagement with our overall goal is to deliver a contract that makes good business sense and mission sense. So This is where we're not doing this in a vacuum, as you know, as Susan was talking about, with the level of engagement that we've had. So what I'd like to do is highlight some of those changes and some of the feedback that we received from you. So as shown on this slide, we have received over 2,200 questions and the 680 survey results. And I was part of the team that we looked at every question, took the time to look at the RFP and the draft RFP, and to make changes where appropriate, to look at regulations, laws, and achieve the best RFP and ultimately the best contract that we could possibly achieve. So talking about some of those, some of that feedback and some of the draft RFP 1 to draft RFP 2 changes. Looking down the line here, starting on the left, the 10-year period of performance. So the survey responses were really overwhelmingly positive. We like that too on the government side with acquisition planning and so forth. And it was also apparent that on the industry side with your long-term planning and your business needs, the 10-year period of performance was appropriate. On the NAICS strategy, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the NAICS strategy on the upcoming slides, but really it was a regulatory change that had driven us to relook at the NAICS strategy, have something in draft RFP 1, then there were changes in the draft RFP 2, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. Master contract, or at the IDIQ level, CPARs. The feedback there was generally mixed, but we really looked at the CPARs issue and say, is CPARs in the structure the way it is now, doing it annually at the master contract level, is that appropriate? And ultimately, we are very aware that at the ordering contracting officer or OCO level, CPARs are done there on performance. So there won't be CPARs at the master IDIQ level, and we'll talk about that more with the performance management requirements that we also put in section F. Moving down to sustainability. We got a lot of feedback on sustainability, and we'll talk about that a little bit later and any alterations that have been made to draft RFP number 2. Teaming and QP relevance and scale. Same thing, those weren't necessarily a targeted survey feedback item, but we did receive a lot of feedback in those areas, and we will definitely talk about those. Contractor business systems. It appeared from the survey results that we have, and talking about, of course, for example, the ISO certifications, accounting systems, estimating systems, that some of them are slightly different in the domains. Generally positive feedback there as well for the various domains. So if we can, go to the next slide, please. So on the slide here, you'll notice that I have NAICS at the top highlighted. The other areas are in gray, and not to worry, I will get to those other areas. But NAICS, the NAICS code and the NAICS strategy, as you know, really drives so much in the evaluation, and not only in the evaluation and the contract award, but it becomes very, very relevant later on and under fair opportunity, under FAR 16505 fair opportunity. So we'll talk about that, and we feel this area, requires a little bit more discussion. So we have that on the next slide. So you'll notice from draft RFP 1 to draft RFP 2, right now, if you look at the draft section that I highlighted below, for administrative purposes, OASIS Plus is going to have a single NAICS issue, the 541990, which is really the preponderance of OASIS Plus overall. Now, that's really for administrative purposes, because as you get your contracts awarded in the various domains, as we move on down, as where you see OASIS Plus primary NAICS, going to talk small business, there will be a single NAICS reported with each contract action. So for instance, you may have multiple domains, say tech and engineering or management advisory, but you will be assigned and overall NAICS, that for purposes of small business, it'll be the largest size standard within your awarded domains. And that's really critical, especially down the road during the re-representation process, that small businesses aren't locked out of domain for opportunity or anything like that during that time. We can go to the next slide. So for unrestricted, the same thought process about the primary NAICS assigned. However, in this case, it'll be based on the smallest size standard within your awarded domains. And again, that's critical to ensure that other than small business requirements are properly enforced, as we see on the slide there with subcontracting plans and sustainability. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so we really wanted to stress here, this was a point in a lot of the feedback and a lot of our discussion. We really wanted to stress that as you'll receive a primary NAICS, and if you hold multiple domains, in my example earlier, I talked about, say you have tech and engineering, management advisory, that doesn't prevent you from competing in another domain or talking about fair opportunities. So you're not limited. As a matter of fact, it preserves the fair opportunity process later on, the way we have the NAICS strategy set up right now. So later on, as it's written right now in FAR 19, in October 2025, the FAR and may be updated, and FPDS may be able to accommodate multiple NAICS. So at that time, we anticipate there will likely be a mass mod. The contract is already built to handle that. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so I spent quite a bit of time talking about NAICS, and we really wanted to. We really valued your feedback there. We wanted to make it as clear as possible, and we appreciate your patience with us as we were working through the NAICS strategy. So some other areas that I want to highlight here, and this doesn't cover every change in its entirety. You know, we definitely encourage you to read every area of the RFP, but these were some of the big areas that we spent a lot of time in based on your feedback and based on the Q&A. So section L&M, which, as you know, is the core of the evaluation, the provisions in there, the various areas that, you know, help define QPs, what is a QP, and that whole area. There have been a lot of updates and clarifications in draft RFP based on your feedback. And even down to, I'll pull an example, even down to the definition of what is surge. That was kind of a common question. And we drilled down and we wanted to explain a little bit more, and how do you prove surge and that type of stuff. So you'll see a lot of that, or you saw a lot of that in draft RFP number 2. Now the teaming arrangements, there were several areas as related to the evaluation and as related to performance. That's very important to ensure that we had to clarify. And overall, the teaming area, we still call that an evolving area that we're refining. But what we can say is that we did realize on the meaningful relationship commitment letters, or the MERKLs, and the affiliated partners, or the APP area, we realized that the original language that we had in draft RFP 1 in that area was more appropriate than what we put in draft RFP 2. So look for the change there, especially with the final RFP with regard to MERKLs, with regard to the affiliations, and you will definitely see that under teaming arrangements. But in the prime sub areas and so forth, there are still some refinements. And again, we're trying to do it in the most fair and transparent way as we can. You'll notice from draft RFP 1 to draft RFP 2, kind of going down there, subcontracting plan and goals, particular on the unrestricted. I would call your attention to some changes made there as well. I talked about the CPARs already, based on feedback that we received and based on us roundtabling and discussing again the CPARs at the master IDIQ level. There will not be CPARs, but I would definitely urge you to look at Section F of the RFP with various performance management areas that have been edited, refined. So I would definitely urge you to look there. Also highlight a lot of questions and feedback that we received on domain scope. There are a lot of good questions. A lot of, what does this mean? Does this fall under that? Does that fall under that? So in our Q&A and in our draft RFP2, you'll see a lot of revisions there to really clarify that, but not to worry. The domains remain the same. The domains that Susan briefed, they remain the same, but there was really a lot of clarifications to sharpen this RFP and to get the best possible solicitation we can out to you. And then the domain matrices, essentially the scorecards. You'll notice there were some slight adjustments to credits that were made as a result of some feedback and some discussions that I know Josh Hausworth, who's coming up next, will talk about a little bit. But again, no big picture changes on the credits, especially like with the QP. So there was a point here and a point there in some particular areas, but no major adjustments. So I would just urge you to make sure that you look at the most current domain matrices and you look at the credits as you're formulating your proposal and as you're formulating your scoring. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Josh Hausworth, one of our contracting officers, to talk about greenhouse gas and sustainability.
Hey, I appreciate that, Ray. Hey, everybody, my name is Josh Hausworth, and I'm the OASIS Plus Small Business Contracting Officer with GSA's Office of Professional Services and Human Capital. I've been with GSA for a couple of years now. Prior to joining GSA, I was a contracting officer with the Air Force for about 11 years. So as we kind of look at greenhouse gas emissions and sustainability as a whole, this is something that we had incorporated into our draft RFP number 1. And we got a lot of feedback on this specific topic. As you probably noticed in draft RFP number 2, there were some pretty significant changes that we made to our sustainability strategy. Some of that feedback that we received was in regards to the proposed rule and the fact that it hasn't necessarily been finalized yet. It was we saw that it could potentially be difficult for small businesses and mid-sized businesses to attain some of these capabilities and qualifications. So we've made some pretty substantial changes to draft RFP number 2 that you'll notice in section H of our RFP and in section L and M of our RFP as well. Specifically, we've removed the post-award reporting requirements from the OASIS Plus unrestricted contract. This puts us in compliance with current federal regulations. And it was never in the small business contract, so you don't need to worry about that. But in regards to scoring and evaluation criteria, we did remove the sustainability related criteria from our evaluation criteria for OASIS Plus small business. You'll see that it's still retained in OASIS Plus unrestricted, but it is a little bit different than what you probably saw in draft number 1. Some key changes are removal of scope 3 GHG emissions reporting and removal of science-based target initiatives reporting as well. So it should be a little bit more attainable for OASIS Plus offers. And I just wanted to highlight that a little bit before I get into kind of the meat and potatoes, which is going to be that what this looks like from the offer perspective. Slide, please. So now that we've introduced the program a bit and talked about some of those key areas that have changed since our first draft RFP in November, I want to talk about how this affects you as industry partners and prepare you for the final RFP. We know that OASIS Plus offers are going to look different. Some companies are going to qualify independently, while others may choose to team for a variety of reasons. Some are going to be small businesses, 8As, hub zones, large businesses. We kind of have something for everyone on OASIS Plus. As you may have noticed in our draft RFPs for small business and unrestricted, there's some slight differences in how teams are treated between the two vehicles. And this is because of the statutes and regulations around teaming and what we must consider when we talk about contractor teaming arrangements for potential offers. First off, no offer is required to team. But if you choose to, some of the teaming arrangements that we're allowing under OASIS Plus are joint ventures to include mentor-protege arrangements, small business prime sub arrangements, and combinations of these. For example, you could be a joint venture with proposed small business subcontractors, And we're allowing offers to take advantage of those team member qualifications as if they were submitted from the prime offer in certain instances. I'd highly recommend checking out section L513 for everything teaming related, as it gets a little bit more nuanced than this, especially as you're kind of building your teams out and you're figuring out which companies you'd like to partner with, especially as it relates to business size status for the small business RFP. I just highly recommend that if you are coming in with a team or you're contemplating forming a team, look at section L, look at those sections. It's going to provide you exactly the requirements you need to meet in order to be able to submit a proposal with a contractor teaming arrangement. L513 for that. So as we get into what this looks like from an OASIS Plus offer perspective, I want to walk you through the RFP, talk about some of those unique aspects of it, and wrap this up by talking about how fair opportunity will be handled in the post-award. So as you kind of see here, we have some key sections within our section L that are really going to be the meat and potatoes of your proposal. Sections A through J of our RFP represent our model contract, while sections K through M are specific to the request for proposals and will guide you through your proposal submission process. And specifically reference section L and M. Section L is your instructions to offers, and section M is your evaluation criteria for award. And those two sections are going to be really critical as you're building your proposal assets and you're putting everything together, figuring out if you can qualify for this contract and which socioeconomic contracts you might qualify for, which domains you might qualify for. Highly recommend looking at that. And many of these requirements that you kind of see in front of you, they're going to be the same across domains. There's certainly nuances, which we'll get into a little bit on the next slide, but every domain is going to kind of include some of these baseline requirements, those responsibility requirements, past performance, relevant experience, federal experience, the ability to demonstrate corporate criteria like systems, certifications, things like that. And we understand that this can potentially be a little bit daunting for offers. You see 6 RFPs, you see 8 domains. You're like, how am I going to manage this? Well, we've definitely thought about that. We've been working on a proposal management system called Symphony, which will be released with the final RFP, maybe slightly afterwards. And that is going to help this process immensely for you as an OASIS Plus offerer. You're going to be able to build your company profile, build your team if applicable, and begin uploading your proposal assets, which can then be attributed across your OASIS Plus proposal or proposals if you're planning on submitting to multiple socioeconomic categories. Our intent is to release all RFPs at the same time to maximize efficiency so that offers can easily build their proposals and choose which IDIQs they would like to submit their proposals to. Slide, please. So the OASIS Plus evaluation strategy, with it, we're trying to target all highly qualified offers. So one of the key differences between this and other Max and GUX that you may be familiar with is there's no caps on awards. And you're not competing against other offers for that top 400 spot or that top 100 spot or whatever that cutoff might be. You're competing against a threshold, and that threshold is what we call the qualifying threshold. That qualifying threshold is unique for small business, and it's unique for unrestricted as well. For small business, it's 36 out of the available 50 credits. For unrestricted, it's 42 out of the available 50 credits. And if you meet that qualifying threshold for a particular domain, you'll receive a OASIS Plus award. It's a very transparent process. You can look at our qualifications matrix, which is broken down by each domain and each small business or unrestricted vehicle, and see exactly what you need to submit in order to meet that qualifying threshold. The majority of the threshold, the majority of the capabilities and qualifications that you'll be demonstrating is really coming from qualifying projects. So if you're familiar with other GSA Max and GUX, you may be more familiar with the term relevant experience project. It's essentially the same thing. And we also allow non-relevant qualifying projects as well, which I'll kind of talk about a little bit on the next slide as we get into going down the qualifications matrix. One of the great things about OASIS Plus is there's multiple avenues to meet the domain qualification threshold. You can do this by having heavy domain relevant experience. You can do this with having moderate domain relevant experience and quite a bit of corporate level criteria. You can show us your systems, your clearances, all of those things, and each offer's proposal is going to look different, and the ways that they meet that qualifying threshold are likely going to be very different. And that was done by design. We want a diverse set of contractors on OASIS Plus to meet our federal agencies' needs, which kind of on that same topic, that's why you're going to see tailored factors for each particular domain. So if you look at the qualifications matrix for technical and engineering, you're going to notice it's quite a bit different than that of the intelligence domain. And that was because those success factors and those desirable qualities for the tech and engineering domain are not necessarily the same as those for the intelligence domain, which tends to rely on more clearance-based, facility clearances, that type of thing. So each domain's different. If you're going to submit your proposal across domains, you want to be familiar with those scorecards for each domain. Some examples here of some of these differences. The enterprise solutions domain, for example, if you look at this domain, you probably noticed that the thresholds are a little bit higher to qualify. Dollar values are significantly higher than other domains. And that was done to target those highly qualified and technically capable companies to perform those larger enterprise solutions, which tend to be more specialized and complex. Like I mentioned before, the intelligence domain, this one is unique as well. It certainly incentivizes and weights clearance staffing more, and those facility clearances and things like that, because those were really desirable based on feedback from our acquisition workforce. And before we go to the next slide, I just want to talk about a little bit of the methodology of how we created our evaluation criteria. Since the inception of OASIS Plus, and like Adam mentioned, when it's called Big Mac and Services Mac, we've been engaging with our acquisition workforce throughout this process. We've done many focus groups. We've engaged with different communities of practice and groups from different agencies, along with doing surveys and things like that, in order to really figure out what it is that they want from a contractor. And we did it on a domain by domain basis. So we got some really good criteria, or some really good information from that. And we also supplemented that through those focus groups to make sure that the data that we were seeing was accurate. And if it wasn't, to make those adjustments before we put that draft RFP number 1 on the street. So what I'd like to do is to kind of walk you through our qualifications matrix. And the one I'm going to walk you through is the technical and engineering for our small business, and then talk about some of those differences between the small businesses and the unrestricted vehicle. Slide, please. So this is currently attachment JP8 for our RFP, and the qualifications matrix includes scorecards for every domain for small business and unrestricted. As of right now, we anticipate those qualifying thresholds for small business being the same for all of the socioeconomic categories as well. So if you're a small business, or if you're a hub zone, or you're an 8A or woman-owned or STVOSB, you can reliably expect those qualification thresholds to be the same. There may be some nuanced requirements here and there in each of those vehicles, but not too many. So as you're building your proposal out, kind of like I mentioned, the qualifications are weighted based on the needs of our acquisition workforce and balanced by the capabilities of industry. So many of these come from the qualifying projects, like I mentioned, which are really going to show that domain relevant experience. So if I'm an offer and I'm submitting my proposal to the technical and engineering domain, I'm going to want to, or probably have to, be able to show that I have some level of domain relevant experience. Relevant QPs are going to get you more evaluation credit. But you can also submit those non-relevant QPs to also show some of those capabilities. You're just going to lose out on a little bit of that credit in the relevance category. So if you have 4 relevant QPs and 1 non-relevant QP, you can submit the non-relevant QP to capture, points in scale or integrated experience or management and staffing, and obviously the other categories and the other scorecards. But as you kind of build your proposal assets within Symphony, you're going to be uploading these projects and you're going to be attributing them to whichever domains you're submitting your proposal to. The QPs that you submit are then going to be eligible for those additional areas. So if you have a relevant qualifying project, you'll get 4 credits for that project. If that project is also over 4 million, you'll get 2 credits from the QP scale category. For integrated experience, if you can demonstrate that it meets some of those criteria, you'll get additional credits there, and the same with management and staffing, and so on for the other domains. Past performance is a little bit unique as well. It is tied to the submission of your relevant qualifying projects, and you'll get credits based on those in accordance with each. And I do believe that past performance is pretty standardized across all scorecards. So you can expect that to be pretty much the same for each domain you're submitting your proposal to. So as you can kind of see right here, as we talked about the qualifying threshold before of 36 for small business out of an available total of 50 credits, you can see that a lot of the credits are really tied to domain relevant experience. And like I said, that was done by design because we recognize that, we want those contractors in each domain that are going to be able to meet that highly qualified kind of criteria that we've set to make sure that you are qualified to do work in this domain. However, we also recognize that there are still other aspects that we do want to capture. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Some of those other things are federal experience. So this was by and large one of the things that we noticed from the acquisition workforce as being a desirable trait, is having done work with the federal government previously. So we have a few different criteria. This is what it is for the technical and engineering domain, but you're going to see some notable difference if you look at, say, for example, the research and development domain. And it's not so heavily weighted either that you must have federal experience. You can absolutely come on with all commercial experience and still get an OASIS Plus award. It just might be a little bit harder for you because you're not going to be able to tap into those categories, which do require federal prime contractor experience. Similarly, when we kind of are going down the list of things that are valuable to our acquisition workforce, systems, clearances, and certifications. While it's not as weighted heavily as you're going to see for the federal experience projects, and certainly not as heavily as the qualifying projects, we did want to incentivize contractors that have those capabilities and that they can demonstrate to us. So such as the accounting system, such as facility clearances, and in our unrestricted, which we'll kind of get to in a second, it expands those just a little bit. Same with some certifications as well, which are some that were also highlighted by our acquisition workforce. So in order to qualify, you need to meet 36 of the available 50 credits for the small business contract on a domain by domain basis. If you do, you'll receive an OASIS Plus award for that domain. Slide, please. So this is the unrestricted technical and engineering scorecard. If you're keeping track, this looks almost exactly identical to what you saw previously. The weights are very similar. Some of the actual criteria might be a little bit increased just based on trying to target those contractors that have higher capabilities within, say, for example, management and staffing. I think on the small business scorecard, it's managing 3 or more, whereas on the unrestricted, it's managing 5 or more subcontractors or teaming partners. You're going to notice this on some of the other domains, scale as well, right? So you're going to see these scale thresholds a little bit higher. But largely, it's very similar to the small business scorecard. Past performance is essentially the same. The one difference we're going to see on the next slide here, if you could move forward, please. Past performance does take one other aspect on the unrestricted contract, which is targeting small business utilization in those contractors that have succeeded in the past based on the criteria that we have in that particular category. And it's not weighted so heavily, but it is something that we did want to incentivize. Again, this is all stuff that I already previously talked about on the federal experience projects. And it largely looks the same, but on the contractor business systems, you are going to see that this is expanded, and we did want to target some of those other ones that may be a little bit more prevalent on our unrestricted contract. And the other big change too that you are going to notice in comparison to the small business scorecard is our sustainability related disclosures and certifications. This is what I was talking about before. This does look different than what you probably saw in draft RFP number 1. And we believe it'll probably be a little bit more attainable for offerers coming in, but it is still going to capture those contractors that do have those sustainability related capabilities within their company, and whether they do publicly disclose scope 1 or scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions. Similarly, as we talk about corporate level qualifications, we have other certifications here as well. And these look pretty similar across the board with some targeted differences for certain domains like maybe intelligence or environmental. So you may be thinking to yourself, okay, I'm uploading all of this stuff. What is kind of my incentive maybe for going above and beyond? If I just have to meet the qualifying threshold, and that's a great question. So as you are building your company profile, you're really setting yourself up for success in the future should you receive an OASIS Plus award. Because as ordering contracting officers are going through and doing their market research, they're going to be doing that by looking at vendor profiles. And they're going to be looking at the capabilities of contractors in certain domains. Can I do a small business set aside? Is there capability here? Do I need to go unrestricted? What about hub zone, 8A, so on and so forth, right? And they're going to be looking into those vendor profiles and all of those proposal aspects, not all of them, but business systems, for example. Do you have a facility clearance? What certifications do you have? These are all things that you're going to be able to display in your profile so that OCOs can notice you, and they can hopefully choose that particular domain based on the capabilities of the contractors within that domain. Slide, please. So kind of as we lean a little bit into the post-award aspect of this, I just want to talk about a few things really quick. So as Ray mentioned, I believe earlier, this is a 10-year consecutive period of performance, meaning that it is one base period of 10 years with no options. Now, with that, we do still have certain requirements for the Federal Acquisition Regulation and for the SBA regulations, such as the re-representation at the 5-year anniversary. And this is, there's a clause in the contract that talks about this, and there's also a big old blurb in section G that you can familiarize yourself with a little bit more as to how exactly re-representation works. And for the small business vehicle specifically, this is really critical to ensure that we're maintaining fair opportunity within our small business domains. So say, for example, you get an award, an OASIS Plus award, you get to retain your size status for the first 5 years of the contract, unless there's some kind of triggering event like a merger, innovation, something like that. And hopefully your company is able to get quite a bit of business on OASIS Plus. And maybe now, instead of being a 10 million in annual receipt company, you're a 30 million in annual receipts company. Great job. However, that may take you out of the running. Once you re-represent your size status, you may not be considered a small business anymore for some of those areas within the domains that you initially qualified for. So re-representation is really important because we want to make sure that like-sized companies are competing against like-sized companies, especially, or at least for the small business IDIQs. So I just wanted to hit on that. Highly recommend going in and looking at it. With all the NAICS codes that we have on OASIS Plus, it is a little bit more nuanced, the approach that we're taking. So I'd highly recommend that you familiarize yourself with that. So similarly, if you're an OASIS, current OASIS contract holder, or even on some of our other MACs and GWACs, you may be familiar with dormant status. Dormant status is something that we have built into OASIS Plus as well. In like those situations above, say, for example, you re-represent at the 5-year mark and you're a massive business now. You're no longer a small business. You don't qualify as small for any of the domains that you hold. We're going to, after that re-representation, we don't want those really large companies competing against those small companies. So if you're small for everything, or sorry, if you're large for everything, we're going to, consider placing that contract in dormant status until the point in which maybe you grow smaller, or, we will potentially consider off-ramping or cancellation at that point. Dormancy can also be used for performance management as well. If you're not meeting those performance metrics and deliverable requirements in section F of the contract, that's also a remedy that we have. But primarily, I see the value as in that re-representation aspect and to control for opportunity. Something else, so Susan really hit on the current domains that we have right now, which is our phase 1 domains. And then after our initial source selection, we're going to be releasing our phase 2 domains, which are 5 additional ones. We've built into the contract the ability for us to add additional domains in the future based on gaps in best-in-class vehicles, needs of the acquisition workforce. So that is something that we do have the potential for. Aside from those ones that we've already listed, there's none that we're currently targeting, but I did just want to hit on that as something that you can expect as this contract program is awarded and, potentially expanding. Another cool aspect, I think, of OASIS Plus is we're requiring our ordering contracting officers, or OCOs, to use our task order management system. So under some other vehicles, you might see, there's an email block here that you could use this system, or you could do eBuy. In order to manage fair opportunity for OASIS Plus, we're requiring our OCOs to issue their task order requests for proposal within Symphony. We think that this is going to be great to have a single repository for contractors and also a single area for our ordering contracting officers, so that we can maintain visibility on everything, maintain fair opportunity. And while we're not requiring them to issue their award out of Symphony, they have their own contract writing systems for that. We do want to have a consolidated system for this, which is going to be Symphony. And then similarly, like I was talking about above with dormant status and performance management requirements, we do have a contractor self-assessment as well, which is going to look at those performance deliverables at the master contract level to make sure that contractors are meeting those requirements. And I think one cool thing that we're planning for Symphony as well with this is to make a visualization of this so that it's easier for contractors to see what exactly is required for my contracts, and then easier for us to administer as well from the contracting side of the house. So that's something that we do plan on rolling out after OASIS Plus is awarded, but I did just want to talk to that briefly. Slide, please. So once OASIS Plus is awarded, I just wanted to kind of bring this all together here at the end. So we talked about, what it takes for you as an offer to qualify for OASIS Plus, how to build your proposal, a little bit, at least from the surface level. But I think it's also important for you to understand what this looks like in the post-award as well. Slide, please. So some of this is a little bit more focused on the ordering contracting officer side, but I think it's important for you to kind of see it from their perspective as well, because they're the ones that are going to be issuing the task order requests for proposal. So an OCO is going to, conduct their market research, and like I mentioned before, they're going to be looking at those vendor profiles. They're going to be, building their small business strategy and where they want to go, figuring out which domain they're going to land in. So that'll be kind of their first step. So they're going to select their domain. Slide, please. And then once they've picked their contract family and they pick their domain, they're going to be looking at those vendor profiles that you've created as an awardee of OASIS Plus and be able to filter and look at those certain capabilities which they're trying to target for their particular task order. So if you came in and you said, yeah, I have an accounting system and I have a facility clearance and I have a purchasing system, that's going to show up in your vendor profile, and it's going to be available for our ordering contracting officers to be able to survey and figure out exactly where they want to land within their within the domain or IDIQ, and use it as a great market research tool to make sure that they're targeting their RFP to the right location. Slide, please. The next thing that they're going to do, so in this particular example, let's say the ordering contracting officer chose the technical and engineering small business domain. Within that domain, as you can probably see in section C, if you've looked at it, which is what defines the scope of OASIS Plus, we have a number of different NAICS codes in each particular domain. So as part of their requirements development process, they're going to be choosing which industry makes the most sense for my particular requirement. They're going to check the list of NAICS codes in that particular domain, and they say, oh, great, 541330 is in this domain. That's the NAICS that I'm classifying my acquisition as. So they're going to solicit their RFP to technical and engineering 541330. And that NAICS code, which will actually be reflected as a contract line item number in your contract if you're awarded the tech and engineering domain, that'll be that particular fair opportunity pool that they are soliciting the requirement to. So as they kind of build their proposal in Symphony, you know, they're going to kind of, like you can see on that right side there, they're going to check their contract family, tech and engineering domain, NAICS 541330. They're going to include all of their attachments, things like that. And they can see, you know, real time kind of what that contractor pool looks like within that domain, to make sure that, yeah, it does look like there are capable companies here. Slide, please. And then what they're going to do is they're going to issue their task order request for a proposal. What's going to happen then is they're going to receive proposals in Symphony or through their contracting system, and then they're going to make their award selection information, enter it into Symphony, and then select their award. This is all being developed as we speak. We've been working with Symphony since early 2022 to make sure that not only is it prepared for proposal submission, but also kind of talking through some of these visions that we have for post-award. And also a lot of these capabilities already exist on other Macs and GUEX. So, you know, it's kind of using that framework to build it and make it work for what we're trying to accomplish on OASIS Plus. Slide, please. So I'm going to turn this over to Adam Soderholm. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk with you about the OASIS Plus evaluation criteria, what it's going to mean for you as an interested party. I hope you gained something from this. Highly recommend staying and listening to Adam, as he has some really good links and information that'll probably help you as we near the finish line for the final RFP. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh, Ray, Susan, and the rest of the team behind the scenes for putting together today's session. And of course, thanks again to all the industry partners that have joined today to learn more in your decision process regarding OASIS Plus. So I have just a few quick notes and reminders before we go. We know that the final RFP will be coming out shortly, and there are a couple of events that will be dependent on the exact date of that final RFP release. So once it's out, we can then record the pre-proposal conference and share that out to interested parties as the next major piece of information we're going to deliver in this manner. We can also put the finishing touches on our training for proposal submission using the Symphony tool and provide any updates if needed on the registration date and time there. In the meantime, if you have not already registered in the Symphony tool and plan to submit a proposal, you are able to sign up for access now. This is the same tool we use to collect Q&A for draft number 1. So if you registered then, there's no need to do it again. It's the same system. Our primary communication channel is our OASIS Plus Interact page. If you're not already signed up for those emails, please consider doing so you can stay on top of any new information that's coming out in real time. And I mentioned at the start of the session that we have a centrally monitored email box for any question or feedback, and that is here on the screen, pshc-dev@gsa.gov. Lastly, the official place for solicitation posting and where we have placed our drafts is in sam.gov. And the link on the screen here will take you to the specific OASIS Plus opportunity and currently draft number 2 that we've been talking about today. Thanks again for joining, and we look forward to continuing this journey with you as industry partners. Have a great day.